My parents always demanded I repay the family debt, but I didn't realize it was actually a rotating system where each child was secretly financing the others. I still remember the exact words my father used the night everything started to unravel. "You exist because of this family debt, and you will repay it." He said it like it was a law of nature, not a choice. I was 19, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a printed spreadsheet with my name at the top. Every month, I was expected to transfer a fixed amount into what they called the family obligation account. I thought it was for their mortgage or some old medical bills they never fully explained. But something about the way my mother avoided eye contact that night made my stomach tighten. There was a second sheet stapled behind the first one, and I only noticed it when the fan blew it slightly open. It had my siblings' names on it, and beside their names were numbers that didn't make sense, numbers that looked like payouts, not debts. When I asked what it was, my father slammed his hand on the table. "Don't question what keeps this family afloat." That was the first time I felt like I wasn't being told the whole truth. I had two siblings, Ethan and Lyra. Ethan was older than me by 4 years, already out of the house. Lyra was younger, still in school, always treated like she needed protection from everything. And me, I was the responsible one, the one who always had to contribute. At first, I believed it. I worked part-time while studying, sending almost half my income home. They called it duty. They called it gratitude. But I started noticing something strange when I visited Ethan one weekend. He had a new laptop, expensive shoes, and an apartment that looked way beyond what he should afford. When I joked about it, he went quiet. Too quiet. Then he said something I didn't understand at the time. "Just make your payments. It all comes back around." I laughed it off, but the way he said it stayed with me. A week later, I checked my bank transfer history. Every payment I made to the family obligation account was immediately split, not to my parents, but into two separate accounts I didn't recognize. One matched Ethan's full legal name, the other matched Lyra's school account. I thought it was a mistake, a banking error, so I confronted my mother. She didn't deny it. She just said, "That money is for the family." But her voice shook slightly, like she was repeating something rehearsed. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about the structure didn't feel like debt anymore. It felt like circulation. The next day, I asked Ethan directly where his money came from. He smiled like I had finally caught up to something obvious. "You're still thinking in straight lines," he said. "What does that mean?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he told me to talk to Lyra. That was the first real crack in the story. I thought I understood. Lyra met me at a small cafe near her school. She looked nervous from the moment she sat down. Before I even spoke, she said, "I know why you're here." That stopped me cold. She pulled out her phone and showed me something I didn't expect, a screenshot of the same family obligation account, but with her transfers highlighted. "I pay into it too," she said, "but I never see it leave the family system." Her voice dropped lower. "It goes to Ethan." I felt like the floor shifted under me. "That doesn't make sense," I said. "It's supposed to go to our parents." She shook her head immediately. "No, it rotates." That word stuck in my mind, rotates, like it wasn't money leaving the family at all, but moving inside it. She leaned closer and said something that made my chest tighten. "Mom and Dad don't keep it, they redistribute it." I left that cafe with my thoughts spinning. Nothing about this felt accidental anymore. The next week, I started digging deeper into my own records. Every transaction I made had a pattern, a cycle. The money didn't accumulate anywhere external. It looped, always looped. But I couldn't see the full pattern yet. Then something happened that changed everything. I got a notification from my bank about an internal account restructuring. My family account had been renamed, not deleted, renamed, to Cycle Node C. I had no idea what that meant, but it sounded clinical, engineered, controlled. That night, I confronted my father again. I demanded to see the original family debt. Not the spreadsheet, the actual records. He stared at me for a long time before speaking. "You think you're ready for truth?" he asked. Then he stood up and walked to his office. He handed me a thick folder I had never seen before. It wasn't debt records. It was financial mapping diagrams, arrows connecting all three of us. Flow cycles between accounts, timed distributions, conditional transfers. It wasn't debt at all. It was a system, a rotating financial loop designed with mathematical precision. My hands started shaking as I flipped through it. "This doesn't go outside the family," I whispered. My father nodded. "It never was meant to." Then he said something I didn't understand at first. "Each of you funds the others at different stages of your lives." I looked up at him. "That's not debt," I said. He replied immediately. "It's balance." But balance didn't explain the secrecy. It didn't explain the guilt, or the pressure, or why they made it sound like punishment. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the system. If what he said was true, then none of us were actually losing money. We were just moving it. But why lie about it? Why call it debt? Why make us feel like we were being punished? I met Ethan again. This time I showed him the folder. He didn't look surprised. He actually laughed. "You finally saw the map," he said. "What map?" I asked. He leaned back and sighed. "Mom and Dad didn't want us resenting each other." I frowned. "That doesn't explain anything." He nodded slowly. It explains everything you don't want to accept. He then said something that made my skin crawl. If you knew your tuition was paid by Lyra's future allowance, would you still study the same way? I froze. That's not possible, I said, but he didn't argue, he just looked at me, and that silence told me everything I needed. I went back to Lyra immediately. She was crying before I even spoke. I found out something, she said. I'm not just receiving money. What do you mean? I asked. She hesitated. Then she showed me her updated financial statement. Part of her transfers were marked as advance recovery. She whispered, I'm paying back things I never borrowed. That sentence broke something in my understanding of the system, because if she was paying something back, then someone had to have received it first, and I hadn't, which meant it wasn't linear, it was layered. That night I couldn't stop thinking. I started drawing it out myself. My income flowing in, then split, then redistributed, then partially returned through different categories. It wasn't just rotation, it was sequencing, a timed loop across years, and then I noticed something I had ignored before. Each of us had different cycles. Ethan's cycle was labeled Phase A Stabilization. Mine was Phase B Expansion. Lyra's was Phase C Recovery. That didn't sound like family accounting, that sounded like system design. I went back to the folder again, flipping faster this time. Hidden in the back was a handwritten note from my mother. It said, if they ever understand the full cycle, explain it gently. That was the first time I felt real fear, not confusion, fear, because that meant they expected this moment. I confronted my mother directly the next morning. I asked her why we were labeled in phases. She looked exhausted, like she had been waiting for this question for years. Because you don't all carry the same burden at the same time, she said. That's not how life works. I told her it wasn't fair. She shook her head. It was the only way to stop resentment from destroying you three. That didn't make sense to me, so I pushed harder. Why not just let us manage our own money? I asked. She finally snapped. Because you would have torn each other apart. Her voice cracked on the last word. I left the house that day more confused than ever. But something still didn't add up. If the system was meant to protect us, why hide it? Why frame it as punishment? That night, Ethan called me. He said we needed to meet, urgently. When I arrived, he was waiting outside his apartment building. He looked different, less confident, more tense. He didn't waste time. They're changing the cycle, he said. What does that mean? I asked. He looked around before answering. It means someone is about to stop receiving. That was the first time I realized this system wasn't static. It was active, adjusting, and then he told me something that made my stomach drop. There was never external debt. I stared at him. What? He nodded. It was always internal. I felt like I had been standing on false ground my entire life, he continued. The debt was just the label they used so we wouldn't question redistribution. I asked him why lie? He hesitated before answering. Because someone has to agree to lose at first for the system to feel real. That sentence stayed with me long after I left. I started rereading everything I had, every transfer, every note, every label, and slowly a pattern emerged I had missed completely. The system wasn't just rotating money, it was rotating sacrifice. Each of us carried a different burden at different times, but none of it was permanent. Ethan's early advantage came from my contributions. My education had been stabilized by Lyra's early allocations, and Lyra's current support was coming from both of us now. But then I saw the final layer, a reserve pool labeled Family Continuity Buffer. That account wasn't assigned to any of us. It was managed solely by my parents, and it was growing. That's when I realized the contradiction. If everything balanced, that account shouldn't exist. I went back home immediately. I demanded answers again. This time I didn't stop talking. I showed them everything I had uncovered. The cycles, the labels, the buffer account. My father went silent. My mother looked away. Then finally, my father spoke. You were never supposed to see that account. That's when everything shifted. He admitted something I wasn't ready for. The system wasn't just about fairness. It was about control, but not control in the way I expected. He said the truth slowly, carefully. If we didn't structure it this way, one of you would always end up sacrificing everything. I asked who. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said something I didn't understand at first. It changes depending on life outcomes. That's when I realized the horrifying part. The system wasn't equal, it adapted. Someone was always positioned to succeed. Someone else was always positioned to stabilize them, and someone was always recovering. But the buffer account, that was the part no one was supposed to notice. I asked him what it was for. He finally admitted it. It's what ensures none of you ever leave the cycle. My stomach dropped. That sounds like trapping us, I said. He shook his head quickly. No, it ensures continuity. But I couldn't unhear what he had just said. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ethan's words, about Lyra's confusion, about the rotating burden, and then I noticed something I had missed for years. None of us had ever been allowed to fully separate financially, not once. The next morning I met Lyra and Ethan together for the first time in weeks. We compared everything, every record, every cycle, and slowly, the truth formed between us. We weren't just siblings, we were stages of a financial relay system. each of us carrying the others at different points in life. But there was one detail that didn't fit. The buffer account kept increasing, even when the cycle should have balanced. I confronted my parents one final time. This time, all three of us went together. Ethan was furious. Lyra was shaking. I was somewhere between both. We demanded the truth. My mother finally broke first. She admitted the system started as fairness, a way to prevent favoritism, a way to make sure no child was left behind. But over time, it changed. It evolved. It became automated, self-adjusting, and eventually self-preserving. Then my father said the final truth. The buffer account wasn't just savings, it was risk insurance, for emergencies no one wanted to talk about. And then Lyra asked the question that changed everything. What happens if none of us need rescuing? Silence filled the room. My father finally answered. Then the system still protects you from each other. That was the moment I understood. The system wasn't about money anymore. It was about preventing collapse, not financial collapse, emotional collapse. They had built a structure so none of us could ever feel abandoned, overburdened, or forgotten. But in doing so, they had also made sure none of us ever truly stood alone. After that day, everything changed between us. We stopped calling it debt. We stopped calling it obligation. But we also couldn't fully escape it, because the system was still running, quietly, automatically, and sometimes late at night I checked the accounts, just to see the cycles still moving. Ethan once told me something I can't forget. We were never paying our parents. We were paying each other through them. And now I understand what he meant. But there's one thing I still think about every day. That buffer account is still growing, and none of us knows what it's preparing for next.